First at 9 this Tuesday, the 4th of March 2025. Proceed with caution. Sri Lanka's economy remains vulnerable despite positive developments, says the IMF.
Critical to sustain the reform momentum, there is no room for policy error.
Contradictions. External evidence gathering mechanism on Sri Lanka by High Commissioner for Human Rights contradicts impartiality, objectivity and non-selectivity, says Ambassador to the UN.
No sovereign country can accept the superimposition of an external mechanism.
On alert. Intelligence agencies monitoring religious extremists identified in the eastern province, says Cabinet spokesperson. Strike or no strike. GMOA calls off the planned strike for tomorrow. Supplementary services to proceed with union action despite GMOA's decision.
Chino Dairy, Sri Lankawama Kiren Perata. ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දෙනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
කට්ට පරිස්සම් කරගත්තොත් අපි පරිස්සම්.
ඉතින් මොකටද නිකන් නාගන්නේ? ස්වදේශී කොහොඹ ලෙමන් ග්‍රාස් අද කාලෙට ෆ්‍රෙෂ්ම විසඳුම.
From Derana, this is Derana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9, brought to you by Sri Lanka's most trusted news source, Derana. I'm Tarindu Mahendra, joining you live with the latest in Sri Lanka and around the world. In your top story tonight, Senior Mission Chief of the International Monetary Fund to Sri Lanka, Peter Brewer, says Sri Lanka's economy remains vulnerable despite recent positive developments. However, addressing the IMF's first media briefing on Sri Lanka following the disbursement of the $334 million fourth tranche of the extended fund facility, Brewer expressed optimism that with economic opportunities returning to the island nation, it will be more attractive for citizens to remain in Sri Lanka rather than emigrate. Meanwhile, IMF highlighted that ensuring tax compliance, avoiding tax concessions and cost recovery pricing for electricity are priorities for the new government moving forward. The global lender also affirmed that Sri Lanka can fulfill its commitments in terms of the restructuring of state-owned enterprises without them being privatized.
The IMF Executive Board's approval to complete the third review recognizes the strong program performance. All quantitative targets for end December 2024 were met, except for the indicative target on social spending. Most structural benchmarks due end January 2025 were either met or implemented with delay. Despite these positive developments, the economy is still vulnerable. It is critical to sustain the reform momentum. There is no room for policy errors. Boosting tax compliance and refraining from tax exemptions are key to maintaining support for economic reforms. Restoring cost recovery electricity pricing without delay is needed to contain fiscal risks from state-owned enterprises. We have looked at the budget and have, of course, discussed it with the authorities. Tax revenue was a key driver of the crisis. Sri Lanka was the country with the lowest tax take amongst middle and low-income countries. Since then, tax as a share of GDP has increased by 5 percentage points. That's a significant increase, but by no means is excessive. The essential services that the government provides need to be funded. For that reason, ensuring that there is sufficient tax revenue remains a priority.
Doctors are threatening to go on strike from tomorrow. How concerned are you that this kind of growing labor unrest, how it will affect the overall IMF program?
There is, for the first time in a long time, an increase in civil service wages, while at the same time the personal income tax is reducing considerably. Everyone who can needs to make a sacrifice. Sticking with the reforms is really the best way out for Sri Lanka to assure its sustainability. It's important for everyone in Sri Lanka to recognize that. This is the last budget where there is still a bit of an increase in revenue is needed, 1.5 percentage points of GDP, and thereafter it'll be much easier going forward.
On the SOE restructuring, the most crucial element government is that the state-owned enterprises are managed in a prudent manner so as to avoid the accumulation of losses or debts. In that sense, the SOEs can be managed prudently while remaining state-owned, or they can be divested partially or completely. We are assured by the authorities' commitment to ensure that these enterprises do not become a burden for the budget or for the government debt. Other commitments under the program include making the SOEs more transparent, and then to allow the economy to grow, it is important that the consumers of services receive the best value for the price they're being charged. This involves running SOEs in the most efficient manner and ensuring that they're following the best governance principles. We're quite satisfied with the progress here.
Protecting the poor and vulnerable is an important component of the EFF program. So the EFF supports this objective through the different reforms, through macro stabilization, but there is also a floor on social spending in the program that we assess on a quarterly basis. This means the government has to spend a minimum amount to protect the poor and vulnerable. The key commitment is for the authorities to continue strengthening the coverage, the adequacy, and the targeting of social spending. Recent announcements related to the expected increase in the payments for the poor and extremely poor categories under Aswasuma, or the announcement that the payments would also increase for the elderly, the disabled, and chronic kidney patients are aligned with the authorities' commitment to continue strengthening social safety nets. It is also very important to make sure that this coverage under the Aswasuma program is above the poverty rates that are currently.
Sri Lanka lost 10% or so of its economic activity as a result of this crisis. Since then, it has already recovered 40% of the income it has lost in the preceding 5 years. Things are turning around significantly in Sri Lanka. As economic opportunities return, incomes will increase and poverty will be reduced, and it'll be more attractive to remain in Sri Lanka and not leave. Those who have emigrated may find opportunities back in Sri Lanka again.
Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Sri Lanka to the United Nations, Himali Arunatilaka, emphasized that Sri Lanka will expand the work of the proposed Truth and Reconciliation Commission to investigate acts of violence caused by racism and religious extremism and address past issues with enhanced public trust and functional independence. The ambassador made these remarks while addressing the 58th session of the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva. Ambassador Arunatilaka also reiterated that the external evidence gathering mechanism on Sri Lanka by the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights is unprecedented and contradicts impartiality, objectivity and non-selectivity. Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Sri Lanka to the United Nations in Geneva, Himali Arunatilaka, addressed the 58th session of the Human Rights Council yesterday. This is the first update on Sri Lanka's human rights delivered at Geneva by the new government led by President Anura Dissanayake.
The government has prioritized economic growth, which is inclusive, where all citizens have enhanced economic opportunities. The rule of law, transparency, accountability, and reconciliation will prevail in order to ensure sustained economic growth and social well-being of the people. The government has committed to protect democracy and human rights of all citizens, including addressing past issues, ensure the related domestic processes to be credible and independent within the constitutional framework, and to examine carefully and expand the work of the proposed Truth and Reconciliation Commission to investigate acts of violence caused by racism and religious extremism. The work of the Office on Missing Persons continues with enhanced public trust and functional and financial independence. We regret the continuing inconsistent application of human rights principles through the work of the Council that has resulted in the erosion of trust in the human rights architecture, making countries less likely to respect the noble purposes for which the Human Rights Council was created. Sri Lanka has consistently spoken out against country-specific resolutions that do not have the concurrence of the country concerned. The external evidence gathering mechanism on Sri Lanka contradicts the Council's founding principles of impartiality, objectivity, and non-selectivity. No sovereign country can accept the superimposition of an external mechanism that runs contrary to its constitution and and which prejudges the commitment of its domestic legal processes. Sri Lanka is determined to deal with human rights challenges through domestic processes and will continue its constructive engagement with the Human Rights Council and regular human rights instruments in a spirit of cooperation and constructive dialogue. Sri Lanka reiterates its commitment to multilateral cooperation in pursuit of peace, prosperity and sustainability, along with the promotion and protection of all human rights.
පිරිපුන් ජීවිතයකට ඔබ සමගින් පෙරට Union Assurance. චන්දරුසුමේ කාගෙන් මන අපේ සිග TV සඳහා සුපිරි ඩීල්.
Don't waste time. Start your degree with pending A-level results this February with our partner universities. Call ACBT on 0117 699 499.
Malibu chocolate cream, inguru and lemon puff. Less sugar, same great taste. From Malibu.
Cabinet spokesperson Minister Dr. Nalinda Jayatissa says military intelligence is currently investigating a religious extremist group identified in the eastern province of Sri Lanka. He made this statement during the cabinet briefing today. The cabinet spokesperson also noted that the government plans to be more involved in the security of the Indian Ocean going forward and has given certain objectives to the Sri Lanka Navy regarding maritime security. Additionally, he emphasized that the enhanced budgetary allocation for the defence sector this year will facilitate the adoption of the latest military technology.
Can you explain why the government is reducing the size of the armed forces, and also does the government have the complete loyalty of the military?
ජනාධිපතිවරයාගේ ප්‍රකාශය හරිම පැහැදිලි.
The President's statements are very clear. We are working to build a professional armed force. We are striving to enhance their professionalism. The military must remain loyal to the nation, not the President, the Minister, the Deputy Minister or any particular family. The duty of the armed forces is to protect the nation and its citizens. Therefore, the professionalism required to fulfill this responsibility must be strengthened. We should have prioritized discussions on building professionalism earlier, following the conclusion of the 3-decade-long war. Additionally, the number of personnel recruited into each branch of the military during various stages of the war must be reassessed in the post-war period, considering the evolving global security landscape. The President spoke about a 5-year plan that has been implemented based on expert recommendations. With the downsizing of the military, we have also increased the budget for the Ministry of Defence to acquire necessary technical equipment. In particular, we recognise the increasing need for security intervention in the Indian Ocean. This is why we have set specific objectives for the Navy. These are not political decisions but strategic decisions related to security.
අත්‍යන්ත ඉංග්‍රීසි පුවත්පතක තිබුණා ඇමති අන්දර්ජේපාල කෝට් කරමින් නැගෙනහිර කල්මුණයි ප්‍රදේශයෙන් මුස්ලිම් අන්තවාද කණ්ඩායමක් බිහි වෙලා තියෙනවා කියලා. මොකද්ද ඇත්තට මේක ජාතික ආරක්ෂා තර්ජනයක්ද?
දැනට ගෙනහිර පළාත කේන්ද්‍ර කරගනිමින්
We have received some information regarding the presence of such a group in the eastern province. Security forces and intelligence agencies are currently investigating the matter. I believe the President has also commented on this to some extent. At this moment, I can only confirm that security forces are closely monitoring their activities.
රටේ පොලිස්පතිතුමාව පොලිසිය විසින් හොයන තත්ත්වයට ඇවිල්ලා තියෙනවා. ඒ පිළිබඳ කැබිනට් මණ්ඩලයේ අදහස මොකක්ද?
කැබිනට් මණ්ඩලයේ අදහස
The Cabinet's position is that all individuals connected to this incident must be arrested. The individual in question has abandoned his residence and even left behind his personal security officer. We are also tracking several other individuals and we hope they will be apprehended as soon as possible. Government is set to launch a 100 megawatt solar power garden project in Siambalandur spanning over 219 hectares in line with government's objective of fulfilling 70% of Sri Lanka's electricity demand from renewable power sources by 2030. Meanwhile, the National People's Power's manifesto, A Wealthy Country, A Beautiful Life, was approved as the government's national policy framework. With that, here's more on the cabinet decisions taken during the week. Government gave the green light to sign a memorandum of understanding with the Institute of Vital Strategies and the Ministry of Health and Mass Media aimed at obtaining technical support for strengthening the population-based cancer registry program in several selected districts. The program is slated to utilize around 19.5 million rupees on identification activities through the Sri Lanka Health Information Society. A portion of land spanning over 219 hectares has been allocated for a 100 megawatt solar power garden project facility in Siamalanduwa. The project is being launched in a bid to meet government expectations of fulfilling 70% of Sri Lanka's electricity demand from renewable power sources by 2030. Meanwhile, government is set to introduce a number of new legislations and amend certain existing legislations in the Government Law Regulation Programme 2025 under the purview of the Ministry of Urban Development, Construction and Housing within the year. The legislations expected to be introduced are the National Drinking Community Water Development Act, Sri Lanka Actual Property Professional Institutions Act to legalise the China-Sri Lanka Consolidated Research and Model Centre, and the new Act to facilitate condominium properties, which will include provisions of the Apartment Ownership Special Provisions Act No. 23 of 2018. Meanwhile, the existing legislations which are to be amended are the Construction Industries Development Act No. 33 of 2014, the National Water Supply and Drainage Board Act No. 2 of 1974, the Town and Country Planning Ordinance No. 13 of 1946, the National Housing Development Authority Act No. 17 of 1979, the Urban Settlement Development Authority Act No. 36 of 2008, the Urban Development Authority Act No. 41 of 1978, the Sri Lanka Land Development Corporation Amendment Act No. 13 of 2021, the Apartment Ownership Act No. 11 of 1973, and the Common Amenities Board Law No. 10 of 1973. Meanwhile, the Cabinet of Ministers approved the National People's Powers Manifesto, A Wealthy Country, A Beautiful Life, as the government's national policy framework.
Fast track your career from O-levels with eSoft.
ඩයිබටසෝල් සීනිවලින් පරිස්සම්වන ඔබට අමතක නොවන පෝෂණය.
කැලනි වයර් කිසිගින්නක් නෑ.
කිසිගින්නක් නෑ. කැලනි ෆයර් ෂීල්ඩ් වයර්.
Malibu chocolate cream, inguru and lemon puff. Less sugar, same great taste. From Malibu.
Responsibility to look after our health.
The best nutritional supplement for diabetic patients with no added sugar. Maliban Vitagen. Stay healthy for a good reason.
Fuel distributors and filling station owners today unanimously agreed to continue the fuel distribution process under the new formula introduced by the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation. Fuel distributors assured that the distribution of petroleum products will return to normalcy, with orders being placed for additional fuel stocks. A meeting between the members of the Fuel Station Owners Association and the Petroleum Distributors Association and the chairman of the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation, DJ A.S. Rajakaruna, was held this morning. This came against a backdrop where long queues had emerged in front of filling stations across the country, with fuel distributors withdrawing from placing orders for fuel stocks following the CPC's decision to abolish 3% commission granted to them.
The CPC said that the fuel distribution process will continue at the new rate. We agreed with the CPC to amend the discounts within the next 2 weeks. The CPC chairman agreed to amend the new discounts in case of any shortcomings. We pledged our support to distribute fuel stocks without any disruptions. We will continue the fuel distribution process at the new discount rates for a month. If any shortcomings are identified during this period, we will convene another meeting on the 18th of this month to discuss the matter. After that, the fuel distribution process will continue at the 3% rate.
Meanwhile, Vice President of the Petroleum Distributors Association, Kusum Sandanayaka, and Director Shanta Silva were summoned before the Criminal Investigation Department this morning. This came following an attempt lodged with the CID over an alleged attempt to disrupt the country's fuel distribution system.
සුගිත ඇතිවෙච්ච සිදුවීම් සම්බන්ධයෙන් ප්‍රශ්න කිරීමට එහෙම නැත්නම් කට උත්තර ලබා ගන්න එන්න කියලා තියෙනවා. අපි ඒකට සහයෝගය ලබා දීම සඳහා දැන් මේකට ඇතුල් වෙනවා. වැරද්දක් කරාද? නෑ අපි එහෙම කිසිම වැරද්දක් කළා නෑ. අපි උනට මේකට බලමු. අපි ගිහිල්ලා බලලා ඉවරලා අපි කියන්න මොකද කරන්න පුළුවන්.
Public Security Minister Ananda Vijayapala says steps will be taken to urgently amend the Online Safety Act. He made this statement in response to a question raised in Parliament today by opposition leader Sajith Premadasa. Meanwhile, Parliament also focused on the planned health sector strikes.
යෝජිත ආදායම් බදු සංශෝධිත පනත මගින් තොරතුරු තාක්ෂණය හරහා උපයන විදේශ විනිමය 15%ක බද්දක් අප්‍රේල් මාසයේ සිට පැනවීමට රජය යෝජනා කර ඇති අතර මෙම බද්ද සේවා අපනයන ශේෂ්ත්‍රයේ නියැලෙන අපනයනකරුවන් කී දෙනෙකුට බලපානු ඇතැයි රජය අපේක්ෂා කරන්නේද?
ඔබ දන්නවා මේ අපනයන සේවා.
As you know, the previous government proposed a 30% income tax on service exporters. We have reduced it to 15%. Specifically, the tax will be applied to service providers residing in Sri Lanka who offer services to foreign countries. It will be imposed on their total profit. We estimate that this tax will generate revenue equivalent to 0.4% of GDP for the government in 2025. Since only residents will be taxed under this scheme, foreign remittances sent by non-residents will not be subject to this tax.
විදේශ ප්‍රේෂණ මෙම බද්දට යටත් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. දැන් ඔබතුමා
Take out your phone and see how many online casinos there are in Sri Lanka, yet no tax is being imposed on them. From day one, we have been asking for this, bring in emergency bills to regulate and tax these businesses. You had plenty of time for this. We raised this issue with the previous government as well. If you can impose a 15% tax on online service providers, why can't you tax online casinos?
ඔන්ලයින් කැසිනෝ එකට බදු ගහන්නේ නැත්තේ?
මාරේවල් තියෙනවා බදු අය කර ගැනීම ට්‍රේස් කර ගැනීමේ තාක්ෂණික ගඩලු.
There are many technical challenges such as the inability to trace the money and other regulatory concerns. We plan to implement this step by step in the near future. Currently, our production processes for goods and services rely on traditional employer-employee relationships. However, globalization is changing this landscape. To improve efficiency, we must take broader actions such as adopting new technologies, increasing human capital participation, ensuring fair distribution of production data, and fostering greater economic democracy. One key aspect of our approach is the introduction of amendments to the Employment Act, initially drafted by the previous government.
සංශෝධනය කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා.
Meanwhile, parliamentarians also commented on the planned health sector strike.
මේකේ කොටස් කීපයක් තියෙනවා. එකක් තමයි
There are two main components to our plan. First, we are increasing the basic salary. Second, we are raising allowances for extra duties, holiday incentives, and annual salary increments. Additionally, we are providing a tax concession on the payee tax. As a government, we have granted the highest possible salary increases despite the economic challenges. Since taking office, my first meeting was with the GMOA. When they raised concerns, the president held a discussion with them for over an hour a few days ago. Despite these efforts, the health sector has announced a strike on March 5th, just a day before the scheduled budget debate on the health ministry on March 6th. Furthermore, they have planned an island-wide strike starting March 7th. It is unfair for them to strike when we have provided substantial salary increments despite the country's financial difficulties. We urge them not to take actions that inconveniences patients. We are always open to discussions with all stakeholders. Therefore, we request that they refrain from taking union actions that inconveniences the patients.
ගන්න එපා කියන ඉල්ලීම කරන්න කැමතියි. 80 එක දෙන්න බැරි නම් ආණ්ඩුවේ මුදල් පිළිබඳ ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා නම් මේ 1980 ඉඳන් ආපු ප්‍රතිපත්තියයි වෙනස් කරන්නේ. අහන්නෙත් නැතුව.
The Government Medical Officers Association called off the token strike, which they were set to launch tomorrow until the 21st of March, following discussions with Health Minister Dr. Nalinda Jayatissa. However, the Federation of Health Professionals will continue their strike on the 6th of March, despite the GMOA's decision.
The Government Medical Officers Association directed accusations against the government, claiming that overtime benefits and holiday incentives provided to the health sector have been reduced from the salary amendments proposed in the budget. Following an emergency meeting of the GMOS Central Working Committee, it was decided to launch a strike action starting tomorrow if the government fails to provide solutions to their demands.
හරවන්න වෙයි පස්වෙන්ද වෙනකන් අපි දින දෙනවා උදේ වෙනකොට රජයට බැරි නම් මේක ආපසු හරවන්න පස්වෙන්ද ලංකාව පුරා සියලුම රෝහල් වල අත්‍යවශ්‍ය සේවා විතරයි වැඩ කරන්නේ සියලුම රෝහල් අඩපණ වෙනවා.
However, following a discussion with Health Minister Dr. Nalinda Jayatissa, the association called off the strike action.
අතිගරු ජනාධිපතිතුමා අපිත් සමග අදහස් වමාරු කරගත්තා මේ දිනය තුල.
The President discussed it with us. The Health Minister convened with us today. He agreed to take necessary actions to continue the extra duty allowance, which was at 1/80th of the basic salary, and the public holiday allowance, which was at 1/20th of the basic salary, without any changes. He requested us to give him a fair period of time to take actions in this regard. The Executive Committee decided to give some time without putting the lives of our patients in danger. The government agreed to announce it by the 21st of March. We have decided to postpone the token strike action, which was supposed to be conducted tomorrow, until the 21st of March during the third reading of the budget.
In the meantime, the Sri Lanka Federation of Health Professionals on several occasions has been requesting the government to provide solutions to their concerns over the reduction of allowances granted to the health sector through the budget. Yesterday, the Federation of Health Professionals announced plans to launch a 24-hour token strike on the 6th of March. Accordingly, professionals in the fields of paramedical services, medical laboratory services, radiology, therapeutics, family health services, ophthalmology and entomology, as well as public health inspectors and dental technicians will refrain from providing services to the public on the 6th of this month.
We will not be pausing the strike action just because the government provides a solution to a requirement of one party. Dr. Nalinda Jayatissa has a responsibility to inform the medical officers what measures he will be taking to fulfill the promises. If the minister wants to discuss anything in that regard, we are forever ready. Until the government reaches an agreement with us, we will be conducting the strike action as planned from 8 am on the 6th of March. The Government Nursing Officers Association will be conducting a 3-hour strike action on the 6th of March from 10 am to 1 pm. At 11:30 am, we will conduct mass protest in front of hospitals. If the government is not serving justice, there's no other solution except taking action. Saman Ratnapriya doesn't have to rebel. He found solutions to these concerns as the Director General of Trade Unions. There was no such position before. He was the first ever Director General of Trade Unions, so he could have done it back then.
Meanwhile, non-academic staff members of state universities launched protests in front of universities island-wide. Demonstrations were staged in protest of the government's decision to cut down allowances. In the meantime, the Unemployed Graduates Association launched a protest march from the Rajagiri flyover today in demand of employment opportunities. The association claims the government has only promised 30,000 employment opportunities for unemployed graduates when the number stands at around 35,000 in reality. The protesters then marched towards the entrance to the parliament at Poldua. Thereafter, police took measures to remove protesters disrupting traffic in the area.
The National Police Commission condemned the Acting Inspector General of Police Priyantha Veerasuriya's statement that the Police Commission is interfering with the internal affairs of the police. The Commission further asserted that the Acting IGP's accusations regarding the Police Commission idling when fulfilling its duties were baseless.
Acting Inspector General of Police Priyantha Veerasuriya commented on the Police Commission during a press conference held on the 22nd of February, stating that the Police Commission operates to resolve problems of the people and deter misconduct within the police and not to interfere with the internal affairs of the police. The National Police Commission issued a media release today responding to the Acting IGP's statement. The Commission says that it coordinates with the Acting IGP while exercising its power in accordance with the Constitution, including appointments of police officials other than the IGP and promotions, transfers, disciplinary actions and dismissals. However, the National Police Commission stated that the Acting IGP has arbitrarily denied some transfers approved by the Commission upon his own request and added that his accusations of the Commission idling while fulfilling such duties are baseless. The Commission also claimed that it is not appropriate for the Acting IGP to inquire about the stance of the Attorney General in regard to appointing and transferring officers in charge without the approval of the Commission, as it falls under the duties of the Police Commission.
Welcome back. Now here's a look at local news across the island in brief. The Election Commission announced that accepting applications for postal voting for the upcoming local government elections will end at midnight on the 12th of March. The Election Commission called for postal voting applications starting yesterday. Meanwhile, a three-member Supreme Court judge bench today dismissed a fundamental rights petition filed by Saman Ratnayaka, a former additional secretary to the Ministry of Health, seeking a ruling that his fundamental rights were violated by the Criminal Investigation Department arresting him and remanding him in custody over the legal matter pertaining to the procurement of substandard human intravenous immunoglobulin. Several arrests, including that of the former Minister of Health Keheliya Rambukwala, were made as the authorities revealed that forged documents were submitted for customs clearance to procure a batch of vials containing the drug, which later failed the quality tests. Reportedly, funds to the tune of 144 million rupees have been misappropriated through the unlawful procurement of IVIG. In business-related updates, the government has decided to develop the 24 oil tanks in Trincomalee, which were leased to the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation for 50 years. The CPC will oversee a 3-year project to complete the development of these tanks. The project will include conducting a feasibility study and carrying out the necessary work. Approval from relevant authorities, including the Road Development Authority, Sri Lanka Railways and the Marine Environmental Protection Authority, have already been obtained. The project will be funded by the CPC, ensuring that it does not place a financial burden on the General Treasury. It has also received cabinet approval. In your stock update, the Colombo Bourse closed in red today, dragged down by price losses in counters such as Selinco Holdings, DFCC Bank and Hatton National Bank. The all-share price index slipped 1.84%, ending at 15,870.25 points. Meanwhile, the S&P Sri Lanka 20 fell by 1.62%, settling at 4,748.99 points. Market turnover crossed 2.3 billion rupees. The banking sector was the top contributor to market turnover, while the capital goods sector was the second highest contributor. Foreign participation in market activity remained at subdued levels, with foreigners closing as net sellers. And that's all for tonight on First at 9, and thank you for joining. Have a good night.